Subscribe now, because once you hear what's on these trays, you won't look at food the same way again. Like, comment, and stay with us. This story gets darker fast. US vs UK prison food. Which one is worse? The call came in just before dawn. An inmate was found unresponsive in his cell, tray still on the floor, food barely touched. The guard said it was routine, another medical emergency behind bars. But the paramedic paused when he saw the meal. Grey protein congealed in watery sauce, bread stiff as cardboard. In the corner of the tray, a smear like oil refused to soak in. It smelled wrong. The kind of wrong you don't forget. Across the Atlantic, hours later, a similar scene unfolded inside a UK prison wing. An inmate doubled over in pain after dinner, begging for water, begging for help. The officers logged it as a stomach bug. The kitchen logged it as a compliant meal. Two systems, thousands of miles apart, serving food that looked different on paper, but felt the same inside the body. This isn't about taste. It's about consequences. In the United States, prison meals are often outsourced, contracts awarded to the lowest bidder with promises of efficiency. In the UK, centralized catering and tight budgets shape what lands on a tray. Both systems insist they meet standards. Both point to guidelines. But inside the cells, the stories don't match the paperwork. Investigators began noticing patterns. In the US case, medical complaints spiked after specific menu cycles. In the UK, complaints clustered around deliveries that arrived late, uninspected. Inmates described nausea, dizziness, rashes, symptoms brushed aside as coincidence. Guards heard the whispers. Nurses filed notes. Kitchens kept serving. Then came the first clue that this was bigger than bad meals. A maintenance worker in the US facility reported sealed boxes rerouted at night, labels swapped, dates altered. In the UK, a junior officer flagged missing temperature logs, only to be told not to worry about it. 2 warnings, quietly buried. Families asked questions and got silence. Advocates requested records and received redactions. The systems closed ranks. Because food, in prison, is invisible. It's not a weapon. It doesn't leave marks. And when someone gets sick, the blame is easy to shift. But the evidence was stacking up. Medical reports. Kitchen logs. Inmate testimonies that sounded eerily alike despite different accents and laws. A comparison no one wanted to make was taking shape. And when investigators finally lined up the trays, US versus UK, side by side, what they found wasn't just worse. It was damning. The investigation widened, and with it, the danger. In the United States, a public defender named Rachel Moore began collecting affidavits from inmates who had filed sick call requests after meals. Many described the same cycle, a tray served hot but tasting metallic, followed by cramps, vomiting, and dizziness within hours. Medical staff documented symptoms, prescribed antacids, and sent them back to their cells. The meals kept coming. Rachel traced the menu to a private contractor operating under a web of subsidiaries. The invoices looked clean, too clean. Costs dropped sharply over 6 months while nutritional compliance remained unchanged. That's when she noticed the substitutions. Protein sources swapped, additives reclassified, quality grades downgraded without disclosure. On paper, it passed. In bodies, it didn't. In the UK, investigative journalist Tom Weaver chased a similar thread. He interviewed former kitchen workers who spoke off the record, voices low, eyes scanning for cameras. They described frozen shipments arriving partially thawed, refrozen, and served anyway. Produce marked for processing rerouted to wings untouched by inspection. When a worker raised concerns, shifts disappeared. Contracts weren't renewed. Silence became policy. The tension escalated when a US inmate who'd agreed to testify was transferred overnight to another facility. No notice. No explanation. In the UK, a prisoner who'd kept a diary of meals and symptoms found his cell searched, the notebook missing. Coincidence, officials said. Logistics. Rachel and Tom compared notes. Different systems. Same outcomes. Both uncovered internal emails warning of cost overruns and urging teams to manage complaints. Both found audits postponed, inspections announced in advance, and whistleblowers sidelined. The race against time intensified as illnesses mounted. Then came the breakthrough. A lab technician in the US flagged a sample from a confiscated tray, additives exceeding safe limits when heated repeatedly. In the UK, a retained sample showed bacterial growth consistent with improper storage. 2 findings, independently verified. The kind that couldn't be explained away. Pressure built from above. Rachel received a call advising her to narrow the scope. Tom's editor asked him to balance the narrative. The message was clear: expose too much, and the story might disappear. Inside the prisons, fear spread. Trays went untouched. Hunger became safer than eating. Guards noticed the refusals and logged them as disciplinary issues. Tensions flared. One night, a US wing went into lockdown after an argument over meals turned physical. In the UK, officers pulled trays back after inmates protested the smell. The truth was emerging, but it was twisted. This wasn't a single failure. It was a comparison that revealed something worse. 2 nations with different laws had arrived at the same dangerous conclusion: food could be cut without consequence. And just as the findings were about to go public, a key piece of evidence vanished from secure storage, replaced with a copy marked revised. Revised by someone who knew exactly what they were hiding. The missing evidence set off alarms on both sides of the Atlantic. In the United States, the lab technician who'd flagged the additives was placed on administrative leave pending an internal review. His access badge stopped working the same afternoon. In the UK, Tom Weaver learned the sample he documented was now listed as contaminated during handling, its chain of custody conveniently broken. 2 investigations. Suddenly hobbled. Rachel Moore refused to slow down. She subpoenaed procurement records and found the pressure point. A shared supplier network that sold compliant ingredients tailored to each country's rules, exploiting loopholes with ruthless precision. In the US, the additives were legal at room temperature but unsafe when reheated, exactly how prison kitchens operated. In the UK, bulk freezing met standards until thaw cycles multiplied. Both systems followed the letter of the law while breaking its spirit. Inside the prisons, the human cost mounted. A US inmate collapsed during count, shaking, his skin clammy. The report cited dehydration. In the UK, an older prisoner with a history of stomach issues was rushed to hospital after dinner. Doctors suspected foodborne illness but couldn't access the kitchen logs. Guards were instructed to maintain order. Kitchens were instructed to keep serving. Then came the intimidation. Rachel's client list leaked to a union forum. Names circled. Transfers followed. Tom received an anonymous message with a photo of his notes, taken from a cafe table he'd never left unattended. The warning was subtle and unmistakable: stop. Instead, they coordinated a synchronized release. Rachel secured an independent lab to retest archived samples. Tom obtained invoices showing emergency substitutions approved without inspection. The results aligned. The narrative crystallized: profit over people, consistency over care. The danger escalated when a contractor executive was spotted entering a UK facility hours before a surprise inspection, an inspection that found nothing. In the US, an inspector's report was amended after submission, language softened, conclusions diluted. Oversight existed, but it bent. Public tension spilled inside the walls. Inmates refused meals en masse. Officers faced a choice between enforcement and escalation. One wing went dark as power cut briefly during a scuffle over trays. No injuries reported. Plenty of fear. The comparison now cut deeper. It wasn't about which country was worse. It was about how both had engineered plausible deniability. Different accents, same outcome. As Rachel prepared to file and Tom cued the story, a final email surfaced, sent years earlier, warning that continued substitutions would eventually lead to serious harm. It was signed by a compliance officer who no longer worked there. The clock was running out. And someone was about to make sure the truth arrived, whether the systems were ready or not. The releases hit within minutes of each other. In the United States, Rachel filed her case with exhibits that spoke louder than testimony, lab results, procurement trails, emails stripped of euphemism. In the UK, Tom's article went live with invoices and timelines that refused to blur. The comparison finally landed where it belonged, in the open. The reaction was immediate. Facilities issued statements claiming compliance. Contractors promised reviews. But the documents told a different story, one of standards gamed and warnings ignored. Oversight bodies convened emergency hearings. Inspectors returned unannounced. Kitchens paused service. Inmates were fed emergency rations under supervision while samples were pulled and sealed. The twist came from the past. The former compliance officer, the one whose warning email had been buried, stepped forward. She had kept copies. Not just of emails, but of drafts that never left internal folders, drafts that admitted risk in plain language. She testified to meetings where numbers mattered more than outcomes, where illness was reframed as acceptable variance. Her words didn't accuse a nation. They accused a method. Findings followed. In the US, the contractor faced charges tied to deceptive practices and reckless endangerment. In the UK, penalties and contract terminations rolled out alongside mandated reforms. Meal standards were rewritten to account for reheating, thaw cycles, and storage realities. Independent labs were installed into the process. The fixes were real, but late. Families listened to officials' promised change and weighed it against letters they'd received too late. Inmates returned trays with cautious hands, watching officers watch them. Trust did not snap back into place. It crept. Then came the final comparison, the one no headline could carry. When investigators lined up outcomes, hospitalizations, complaints, redactions, the numbers converged. Different systems had arrived at the same result by different routes. Not worse. Not better. Just equally dangerous when accountability thinned. In a quiet hearing room, a judge said what the reports wouldn't. Food is the most intimate form of custody. You take someone's freedom. You take responsibility for what sustains them. Fail there, and everything else rings hollow. As the story settled, one detail lingered. The compliance officer's last memo ended with a sentence no one had answered. If we can't feed people safely here, where do we think safety begins? Outside the gates, deliveries resumed under new eyes. Inside, the smell of dinner no longer carried the same certainty. And across the Atlantic, two systems learned the same lesson at the same time. If you think this story was intense, you're not ready for the next one. Hit subscribe so you don't miss it.